Welcome back inside the Gamecocks Morning Show, brought to you by Palm Casual, palmcasual.com. Mike's going to fix his microphone real quick. He'll be right back. And there's the great John Whittle with the Big Spur. Where you at, man?
I don't know. I'm somewhere in Ohio.
What the hell are you doing in Ohio, John?
I'm south of Columbus. I'm getting close to Columbus, Ohio.
Did you transfer websites? What happened? What's going on here? Are you going to Bucknuts?
I mean, Bucknuts has a great site. I don't know that they need me there. I'd be pretty darn useless. But no, headed up to Cleveland to catch a couple of Guardians games.
Oh, who are you going to watch, John?
Well, College of Charleston pitcher Bailey Ober is throwing tonight.
Okay.
But Jonah Bride is playing for the Twins up there, so I'm gonna go check out a couple of games. Mark, what is it? Progressive Field off the list. I've never been to a Cleveland Guardians game before, or Cleveland Indians, either one.
Very cool. That's fantastic. That'll be awesome. I think I remember Smoke saying he enjoyed Cleveland. I don't think it was one of his favorite ballparks to hit in. I don't remember why that was, but I know he enjoyed playing in Cleveland. Good fans when they're winning, at least. All right, we'll have fun.
Well, I'm in a place where there's not much off of these. There are not many exits. There's about 10 or 15 miles in between exits, and I pulled off to a station or to a place where, I thought I'd be good. There's one gas station that has a Subway in it, and I figured I'd just get out. I'd sit out outside, but there is a dump right across the street.
Okay.
And it smells outside, so that's why I'm sitting in the car.
Okay. Well, we'll do our best.
Dump. I don't know if y'all can see it over there.
Yeah, this
is great radio.
This is an ITG first here. There's no doubt about that. We've had folks from cars all over the place, but never outside of a dump in Ohio. That's for sure. So we'll mark down this April 28th, 10:27 a.m. John Whittle. All right. Thank you, John. You have a wonderful day. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Mentioned on Friday with Coach Lake, the Gamecocks win when they pitch and they lose when they don't. Now, yesterday was a little bit of an anomaly because they didn't field either. But the Carolina going into the weekend, South Carolina in their wins, a 2.75 ERA in league play, and in their losses, a 9.83 earned run average. And we also accommodated those numbers with if you score 5 runs and you pitch, that's kind of the recipe for this team. They're just they just don't score a ton of runs. So they scored 5 in game 2, they pitched, and they won. They scored 5 yesterday, they didn't pitch, and they didn't play defense, and they lost. And, of course, they lost the opener in that doubleheader on Saturday, John. Let's just start with game 3. You wrote about it this morning, and I think we were all about as shocked as one another who've covered this team or watched this team or been around them or whatever. The defense yesterday, and I know Matthew Becker, you just had a tough day. I mean, it's just one of those days you're just going to write it off. You're going to try to forget about it as quickly as you can. But while there were a bunch of errors on the board, there were also a bunch of just not even bad baseball play. Like they didn't do what they were supposed to do, just brain farts, if you will. That's pretty rare, but that can't happen for this team where the margin of error is incredibly thin.
Yeah, and the way Kentucky plays kind of magnifies that, right? Like
absolutely.
Like I'm not saying that you can't pay attention to detail and have mistakes, but there aren't a whole lot of plays throughout a game where you in baseball where there's just so many more plays that Kentucky has where you have to be on your toes, and it's I don't know. It's just different playing them. It's different playing them, and you expect that a guy is going to cover a wrong base on a bunt maybe once a weekend, or not hold a guy in the right manner, once a weekend. But for it to happen as many times as it did in one game or over the course of the weekend just wasn't quite right. I mean, Jordan Kerion, Paul Maneri told me was benched for game 2 because he made a couple of mistakes in terms of being in not or being late and covering a bunt. He didn't he didn't hold a runner a couple of times on second base when he should have in a proper way. And Will Tippett got benched this for the same thing in game 3. So it was just game 3 was by far the worst, but I don't think it was the best weekend in terms of executing some of the little things that you have to do consistently to beat Kentucky, and that's how they win.
Yeah, it's a circus up there. There's no doubt about it. They've turned this thing into a circus under Nick Mingione. It's a team that talks a lot of trash, doesn't look at their record or their history when they do it. And they play a brand of baseball that most baseball enthusiasts don't love, but that's their brand of baseball, and that's what gets them wins. And some of the antics, the double steals, falling over to steal runs and stuff like that. I mean, it's just kind of their shtick, and you got to be able to ignore it. One thing that happened in that game yesterday that's gotten a lot of run was the pinch hit by Jace Wood, and he sliced one into left field. Monty sent Scobie, and when he sent him, as soon as he sent him, I thought, "Ooh," and he was out. He was out by a country mile there. Yeah, that's a hold your breath one there. I know Paul Maneri defended him after the game. I'll say this about those, John. It's this. You've been around this game for a long time. A, you're going to miss some as a third base coach. B, sometimes when you don't score a lot of runs, you got to take some chances to score some runs. And Monty mostly has been outstanding at third base. And then C, you have to put the situation at hand. You got to put it under. You got to have all the facts, okay? And so for the play itself, 4 things have to happen there, right, John? I know you've heard this 1,000 times, but for those who haven't, 4 things have to happen on that play for it to be executed. The left fielder has to field it cleanly. He has to make a good throw or a decent throw. The catcher has to catch it, and the catcher has to make a tag. So there's 4 things that have to happen on that play. You're playing on a turf surface where balls will skip and jump from time to time, and they're not the best skips or jumps. And that one right there just kind of happened to not – it wasn't a perfect throw, but it was well executed by the Wildcats, and Scobie was out. So while it looks very egregious – and by the way, we don't know the numbers on the left fielder. At least I didn't. I don't know if the kid's thrown anybody out in his life, if he's got a noodle arm. Monty knows all that stuff, so he's going to take a chance there. So while the fan reaction to it, because he was so dead in the rights at home plate, was pretty extravagant, I don't blame him for sending him either. I'm not saying I would have sent him, but I certainly don't blame anybody for sending a runner in that spot.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it wasn't a very good throw, but it just it didn't work out. As you mentioned, there's so much more that goes into it than I think the average person realizes, including a scouting report, which I don't have on that left fielder and how well he throws. I mean, he's thrown 2 guys out, or he has 2 outfield assists this year. So I don't know how they've come about, but that's not a huge number. I think Evan Stone has 3, and he hadn't played but a third of the games. So to put it into perspective a little bit, so I don't know how good that guy's arm is, but you also have to know like who's coming up next.
Yep.
And I mean, God knows I love Evan Stone. He's the guy who's on deck, and maybe he gets a hit, but it's not like you've got your top guy back there either. So you make a decision in that moment, and Monty, if he were telling you Saturday night, if y'all were talking about it, he probably held a runner that he probably wished he would have sent. on Saturday night, and that probably plays into you a little bit mentally as well. Like I need to be a little bit more aggressive, and Paul said in his comments to me yesterday after the game, he said, Monty and I talk all the time about being aggressive and sending runners because you can't count on a hit. So that's just part of it. Guys are going to get thrown out at home from time to time, especially when there are two outs and you're trying to get that run. I'm like you. I probably wouldn't have sent the guy. That it was a new relief pitcher who just gave up a hit to Jace Whittle, but South Carolina had some momentum, had 4 hits in a row, had 4 singles in a row. 3 of them were off a previous pitcher, but there was a little bit of momentum on South Carolina's side, and that kind of ended it.
Yeah, no doubt. And you mentioned it. You got Stone coming to the plate at that point in time. He'd had a tough day. You also have to know your runner. Scobie's not the fleetest of foot, if you will. And he knows that. But again, you're taking a chance there, trying to just get some things going. I mean, I think what he's hoping for is an errant throw, and maybe you steal an extra run or two. I mean, that's what I think you're hoping for in that moment there, and it didn't happen. And if Nathan Hall's coming up, maybe you don't send him. But they did, and that's not why they lost. They also gave up 11 runs yesterday and had a bunch of errors. Game 2, though, John, while again they lost the series this weekend, and there's really not a postseason outlook unless they win the SEC tournament. I can't talk anymore without giving all kinds of kudos to Will Tippett, because this kid's been around a long time. I mean, Will, he's an outstanding dude. He's always ready to play. He's kind of in it for his teammates. He plays sparingly, kind of gets in, and he doesn't see the field for a while. And he got a hold of one the other night to give him that win. And, of course, Ashton Crowther was magnificent on the mound. I was hoping after that 2-run blast and they secured that victory, and you had the walk-off earlier in the week. Those are the things, when you start to pile them and stack them on top of each other, those are the things that really kind of get teams going. So I thought they were going to win yesterday. And it didn't happen, but at least kudos to Will Tippett for getting in there and driving one out of the yard.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, he's a team guy, and it'd be easy to kind of cash in the season if you were him. I mean, he started 74, 76 games over his first 2 seasons, and he's gotten opportunities here and there, but hadn't really been in a starting role very often. He's got 5 starts this year, and a couple of them were at the beginning of the season, and I mean, it's somewhat understandable. It's very understandable. I won't say somewhat. I mean, it's understandable why he wasn't playing. Like Henry Casmer, is a really good player, and Jordan Kerion really stepped up, and first base, Ethan Petrie and Bo Hollins have been playing there and playing well. So, I understand why he hadn't been in there, but he hadn't gotten a ton of run this year, and he's had some late game pinch hit opportunities, and sometimes that gets you starts, and he hasn't always been great this year, but he came through in his opportunity the other day, and I think that shows a level of engagement, and he's very well liked within the team. He said I can feel my teammates pulling for me. And, they wanted that for me, and I wanted to get back in the dugout. That was he went really, really slow from home plate to first base. But when he got to first base, he got around the bases really quickly, so he'd get back in the dugout and celebrate with his teammates. So it was a nice moment for him, and, we'll see. Who knows what's going to happen at second base, this coming week. I don't think that Paul Mainieri was particularly happy with any of those guys at the end of the weekend. Maybe he was with Caden Gaskin, who had a nice day when he came in that game 3, but we'll see what happens there.
I guess I still find it fascinating that it's May and we're playing musical chairs at certain positions, but John, I don't really anticipate, unless there's an injury that flares up with Dylan Eskew, I don't anticipate Stone, McCoy, or Eskew moving out of their weekend roles. I mean, I thought Stone had a nice start the other night, to be quite frank. He battled. He gave up 4 earned runs in 7 innings. He gave him 7 innings, first of all. That's 16 innings he's given him in the last 2 weeks. That's not bad. And then you talk about Jake McCoy, who had another, pretty good start. I mean, I know he didn't get out of the fifth, but it's not like he was blown up. He's had a couple of games this year where it was really bad, and the last couple of weeks he seemed to put it together a little bit more, as we know. And then, Dylan Eskew, that's kind of where I'm leading to here. He came out in the fourth. He had thrown 3 1/3, 64 pitches. I know he had hit a couple of guys, or hit one guy in walk 2. The decision to move him there and go to Jackson Susi, did you learn any more about that? Were you surprised that they went and got him, or was that time?
No, I mean, he's hardly pitched this year. I mean, forget about lately. He's hardly pitched this year. I'm pulling up his stats, right in front of me right now in terms of his game log. But he's been out for a while with various things. I mean, he's had the oblique, he's had back. We had the concussion, but he pitched against Texas A&M. He pitched against Oklahoma. I mean, those were his last 2 appearances. I mean, he pitched 3 innings on April 12th, and then prior to that, it was March 16th. So, the fact that he couldn't go more than about 64 pitches, certainly wasn't much of a surprise to me. With as far as Jackson Susi goes, like I wrote about this a little bit in my takeaways piece this morning on the Big Spur. Like, he's pitched great here his last couple of starts in the midweeks, giving up no earned runs over 8 1/3 or 8 2/3, something like that. If he was recruited to be a weekend pitcher, if you want him to be a weekend pitcher, like, you got to try him out there at some point. He only threw 60 something pitches in the midweek on Tuesday, so he should have been perfectly fine and ready to go from a health standpoint. And he just didn't have it. I mean, he faced 5 hitters his day, but I don't mind going to him. You had everybody, basically everybody to choose from for stints in that game. I don't blame them a bit for trying to try Jackson. They pulled him out of the game on Tuesday early just for just to be able to pitch on the weekend. Mm-hmm. He didn't get the job done, and they went to somebody else. Now, I mean, to me, the more interesting decision was why take out Parker Marlott, when they did. He got 2 outs and 3 hitters and struck out the last guy to end an inning. And, that was the only 2/3 of the inning he threw for the entire weekend. So, he had more left in the tank, I would think. I mean, he's been one of your better relievers. So, I was kind of thinking, you ride with him a little bit longer. And if you get another inning or 2 out of him, you don't have to extend Brendan Sweeney. You don't have to throw Ashton Crowther on back-to-back days. Zach Russell's hardly pitched here in recent weeks. I mean, you don't have to go to him necessarily. Like, there's if you get a little bit more out of Marlott, which I think he had more in him, then you don't have to do at least 1 or 2 of those things. But so I thought that was the more curious decision of how pitchers were handled. But at the end of the day, like I wrote in my story this morning, like, we don't necessarily have all the information. Maybe Parker wasn't feeling great. Maybe his matchups with those Kentucky hitters weren't great, and they didn't feel like they could give away any more runs. I'm not sure, but that was the more curious of the calls for me.
All right. South Carolina back on the field tomorrow night, 6:30. Charleston Southern will be in town. You can catch that on the Gamecock Sports Network. Stuart Lake, formerly a head coach at CSU, and Derek Scott will be on the call. For anybody wondering, there's 3 series left: Florida at Auburn and LSU. Gamecocks, to have any prayer at being in a discussion, are going to need to win all 3 series, and they're going to probably need to win 7 of those 9 games, and then they're going to have to win some games in the SEC tournament. They are 54th right now in the RPI, and they have played the most quad 1 games in the country. They are 5-20 in those 25 quad 1 contests. All 3 series our quad one series that are left with the Gators, the Tigers, and the Tigers here to finish the season. So we'll see where it goes, but the next chance you get to see them is CSU. They've been pretty good in midweeks this year. Carolina, outside of Charlotte, against the Tar Heels, has not dropped a midweek game. They hadn't lost. They don't have a bad loss. They just can't get a bunch of big wins, and maybe that continues. Hopefully it continues tomorrow night.
This is the first time since 2010 where South Carolina's navigated an entire midweek of lesser opponents, mid-majors, and not had a loss. That there was one year, I think it was 18, where Carolina lost to College of Charleston. Obviously, that was the only kind of mid-major loss of the season in the midweek, and but that's obviously a really good team down there in Charleston. So, but it's not an accomplishment to boast necessarily. It's not like it's making a difference in the season, but it is a nice little feather in the cap to be able to navigate a season and not lose one of those bad midweek games. Most teams don't do it. Like I said, it's been 2010 since South Carolina's done it. Tomorrow is a little bit bigger of a challenge than CSU usually is. They're pacing to be over 500 for the first time since 1996.
Yeah.
So, they can still finish under 500, but they're pacing to be ahead of it. I think they've got to win 2 more games to clinch an above 500 record. But good for the Buccaneers down there. And then Winthrop at home, not next week, but the following week will be the last midweek game.
And then Florida, of course, is in town this coming weekend. Carolina, John, they have swept the Gators the last 2 times that Florida's been in town, haven't they?
They have.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe that's a good omen here. Maybe that's a good. Come on, Carolina, you got to keep the trend going here. All right, let's flip it over to softball. We'll get you out of here in about 5 or 6 minutes. Gamecocks 36-13. They dropped the series this weekend to Auburn, including the one that was just bizarre. They could go into a rain delay and then give up 6 runs out of it and fall. Carol, so here's the deal, right? So they got Furman tomorrow at home, and then they've got Alabama coming to town this weekend. And right now, this is what it looks like for the Gamecocks. They have their record at 36-13, 11-10 in the league. They're the 4th ranked strength of schedule in the country. Their only 13 losses are quad one, but they also have 20 quad one victories, which is the 3rd most in the country, John. They've played the most quad one. Carolina baseball has played the most quad ones. Carolina softball has played the most quad ones in the nation, but they're 9th in the RPI right now. The hope is that, again, if things stay on track, they're going to be a host in the regionals. I would say probably win the Alabama series just to make sure, but they're going to be a host in the regionals. But they really want to crack into that top 8 and be a true national seed where they've got home field advantage on their way to Oklahoma City if they can get there. Where do you think they stand today? I'm not sure how much diving in you've done to this, but there's a lot of SEC teams that they're competing with to secure one of those top 8 national seeds.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the thing about it is, there's never been much reason for me to follow the ins and outs of the softball tournament selections, just because where South Carolina's always been. So I can't anecdotally reference past committees and how they've done. I would imagine that it's pretty similar to baseball in that they weigh heavily on RPI, but also want to do their best to try to incorporate teams across the country. And, when you look at it, the SEC has all but 2 of the top 10 teams in the RPI, according to Warren Nolan. Right outside of that top 10, so you've got 8 of the top 10, right? And then right outside of the top 10, South Carolina's at 9. Right outside of the top 10, you have Arizona, you have Duke, Clemson, Virginia Tech, and Stanford. So, you've got some West Coast options out there with Arizona, Stanford, and Oregon that are kind of battling to get in there into that top 8 even. So it's hard for me to imagine that the SEC has 6 or 7 of those 8 national seeds. And South Carolina's got some work to do if they want to grab one of those, probably 5 or 6, 4 or 5, maybe 6 that the league could get. So it's going to take a series win, I think, this weekend against Alabama, and probably a few games in the SEC tournament as well to pass up some of those teams in the league.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think they're on the outside looking into the top 8 right now. The one thing, again, they got to win the series against Alabama. And of course, they can't drop their midweek against Furman. If they take 2 of 3 from the Tide, they beat Furman, they'll finish the year with 39 wins in the regular season. 39-14 would be their record going into the SEC tournament. And if they beat the Tide twice, they'll also have 22 quad 1 victories. That's going to be first, second, or third most in the country. That's the big number, because when you pair that with their strength of schedule, it's number 4 overall, and their non-con is 11 because they play Clemson, they played Duke, and they swept them on the road. They played Texas Tech. They took 2 of 3 from them. I mean, they've done their damage in the non-conference. They split with the Tigers, as we well know. But I wholeheartedly agree with your point, the fact that, you can't – I think you can – like if the facts state it, you can, but I don't think the committee will award the SEC, 6, 7, obviously 8, top 8 national seeds. The Gamecocks will be a national seed, but can they get into that top 8? So then it looks like you got to go into the tournament and win a couple of games. The SEC softball tournament, what's the format of that? Do you know? Did I just put you on the
spot? You did, and I don't know it off the top of my head. Now, I know it's not the same as baseball because, what is it? Vandy doesn't have a softball team. So you've only got 15 teams in the league. So you wouldn't be able to do it exactly like baseball does, where it's just single elimination and some double buys and double buys in there. So I'm not exactly sure what it is. I do think Clint in the chat box brings up a good point, saying I bet their history will hurt them in that regard too when it comes to the national seeds. And, there's some bias always, and you'll never get a committee member to admit that, when it comes down to, Tennessee and South Carolina, Tennessee's done it a whole lot more. We're going to trust them a little bit. But that stuff kind of comes into it as well. South Carolina's maybe a C or a LSU or whoever for that, last spot. South Carolina's probably not going to be the one that gets it because of potentially because of their lackluster history in the sport.
We'll see. Nonetheless, the fact that we're able to have this conversation about the softball program is pretty neat in year one for Ashley Chastain. I think if she's not the coach of the year, not only in the league, but nationally. Yeah, John. This is they were dead. They were DOA when she got there, and look at them now.
There are people that will push back on this, and I understand it. But I think if you're South Carolina, I don't know that you can be great at everything in the SEC. You don't have the money of an alumni base as Florida. You just in schools like that, I just don't think that you can be great in everything. And I've felt like there's probably going to be some sports that I don't want to call them sacrificial, but for lack of a better word, and softball, I've always felt like the path forward to getting to be, immensely competitive in the SEC was just too much because of where South Carolina's been and, the SEC being so difficult. But, I was very, very wrong in that. Ashley, if you get the right person doing the right things and doing them the right way, you can be really good. And Ashley's proving that with her and her staff. So I thought that South Carolina could be competitive at some point when Ashley was here. I had no idea that they could be this good this quickly.
A lot of those players came from Charlotte as well, which just goes to show you she can recruit, because the kids that she signed at Charlotte are here doing damage at South Carolina. A couple of them are in-state local kids, as we all well know. All right, John, we'll let you go with this final question. Final question. One player that did not get drafted for the Gamecocks that surprised you a little bit.
I heard a little bit of you and Mike earlier while I was driving. I didn't hear the whole thing. So I guess I'm probably I'm probably disagreeing with you guys a little bit. I don't think there was really anyone that took me too much off guard. No, I was hopeful that Raheem Sanders and Josh Simon would get drafted, but neither one of those took me off guard too much. I kind of thought O'Donnell Fortune would probably go. He would be the one that took me the most off guard. And y'all may have discussed him at length. I caught the little bit about Sanders and Simon. But Fortune was the one that took me by most surprise. But at the same time, like we've sometimes we forget, and it's more so in baseball than it is with football, but sometimes we forget there's a whole country worth of players out there. It's not just SEC folks, and it's not just ACC folks, and it's not just Pac-4 or Big 12 or whoever else. There's a whole country full of players out there, and scouts and GMs, they're tasked with finding the best ones, and they may not always be at an SEC school, or at least what they perceive. So the fact that some of the guys who were projected to go in the 6th and 7th round, the fact that they didn't go doesn't surprise me too much, because sometimes you just find teams that find guys that they like a little bit more, or find a position that they need a little bit more. But I think those guys that we've talked about, those three, will get a opportunity to be very successful somewhere, and can make their mark. There have been plenty of guys who have gone undrafted who have ended up being pretty good.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. I think in the long run, you're going to see a lot of these names that did and didn't get drafted still in the NFL. It was a good year for the Gamecocks with 5 defenders going this past weekend. John, safe travels. Enjoy the Cleveland. They're not the Guardians. They'll always be the Cleveland Indians. So enjoy that ball game tonight, and give Jonah Bride a big hug from all the Gamecocks in the Palmetto State.
Absolutely. We will. I'll be sure to have a good time up there, and we'll enjoy marking this one off the list and seeing what's happening.
Hey, are you going to do one of those crazy ballpark foods? Do you know what Cleveland's is? I don't know. I'm literally asking.
I have no idea what it is. I'll just have to scout it out when I get up there. I'll report back to you next Monday.
Okay. Send a tweet. Send a tweet, a picture tweet.
I can do that.
Thanks.
I can do that.
All right.
Appreciate you, Jamie. Good talking to you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, brother. There you go. John Whittle.